Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for this Return to Flying workshop brought to you this evening by Astral Aviation on behalf of the UK Civil Aviation Authority. This evening, we're going to be doing about an hour's workshop, and some of the interesting things we're hopefully going to talk about are some preparation for you personally, some aircraft preparation, and also a bit about flying with an instructor, sort of pride before a fall. When should you consider invoking an instructor? Going to do all of this by using a case study, and this case study that we've developed and are going to use. It's based on a lot of a collection of real life aircraft incidents and accidents, but it's actually a fictitious one. It's not a real one. We've sort of collated one for us to use. There'll be chance for Q&A. We'd love you to use the Q&A box so we can pick up questions as we go through this evening. And we'll also have the chat box open as well. So if you want to use the chat box there, let us know where you're from, contribute to the discussion. That'd be great as we go through as well. Last few times Zoom has given us some problems with the chat box. If that's the case, we'll reset it again and do that so we can all contribute on Zoom there as well. Many of you that watched these before, I'm Matt Lane, Head of Training and Active Single and Multi-Engine Flight Instructor and a CAA Senior Examiner. Delighted to be joined this evening by Charlotte and David Chambers, who's a new presenter to us. So it's actually great to have you with us, but I'll let them introduce themselves. So Charlotte, over to you to introduce.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Charlotte Dadswell. I've been flying for over 20 years and I'm a full-time flying instructor and head of training.
Thanks, Charlotte. David, welcome to the team and welcome to contributing to these.
Thanks, Matt. Yes, so I'm a private pilot and I really like going places. I've been all around the UK and toured around quite a bit of Europe, and I've now become a flight instructor and examiner. I part-time instruct from Biggin Hill on the Cirrus aircraft and part-time in various owners' aircraft of different types.
Brilliant. Great to have you both with us there as well. And we should hopefully, Sophie, I know in the background doing the tech is working the chat box there as well to make sure it's there. We've put in the chat box there, our website. If you want to stay in the loop with events and resources, please sign up to our mailing list. It's on there, and that's the web address www.astralaviationconsulting.com. After this as well, you'll get an email with a link to a replay of these and some of the resources, so some of the reports and some of the links that we're going to be discussing this evening. We will push through in that email, so you don't have to write anything down as we go through tonight. It will all get that in a nice email after the event. Many of you will know we do the polls in these, so we can. Yeah, sorry, people are saying the chat's disabled for all attendees. So Sophie is working that and that should be sorted. So apologies for that. This is another Zoom problem again, obviously. But we're going to do a poll first. Those of you that are watching live will be able to interact with the polls, and this will give you a chance to find out the functionality if you've not used it before. If you're watching on the YouTube replay, we'll make sure you get to see the results, but you won't be able to interact. So we'll go for the first poll. Looks like everybody is starting now of saying hello. So the chat has obviously decided to work. This is exactly what happened last time. It was about a few minutes in that Zoom decided to allow it to work. So apologies for that, but hopefully you can contribute now as well. So first poll, what do people mainly fly? We know many of you fly lots of different types of aeroplanes, but just give us an idea. Like I say, we don't record any information from the poll, so we don't know who has said what, but it just gives us an idea of who's with us tonight. So those are the options there. Let's have a look at the results, please. So Sophie, bring up the results. Brilliant. So a lot of single engine piston. Great to have some people from the glider and microlight communities and some MEP people, and some of our gyrocopter friends are here with us again this evening as well. Brilliant. Thank you very much for joining us across that whole range of people. Right, so I'm going to introduce this case study. We will give you a copy and a link to the actual mock accident report. But like I say, this is a mock-up. And this is what it's all about. It's a Cessna 152. The registration you can see there is obviously indicates that it's a fictitious one. But it's departure from a UK licensed aerodrome, Cessna 152, and it's an accident shortly after the commencement of the takeoff roll. And the engine suffered a partial loss of power due to a mechanical defect. The pilot did not reject the takeoff, and the aircraft subsequently stalled and impacted terrain beyond the runway. Pilot sadly suffered some serious injuries, and the aircraft was substantially damaged, as you can see there. Now, this flight followed a period of prolonged activity during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the pilot had intended to conduct a local private flight, VMC conditions, and it had been several months that the aircraft had been parked. Engine start and taxi was reported as normal, but during the takeoff roll, witnesses observed the aircraft accelerating more slowly than they would normally do. And the engine sound was described as uneven and rough, but it was continuing to produce power. And despite the reduced acceleration, the pilot continued the takeoff. The aircraft became airborne close to the end of the runway, but failed to climb normally and stalled at low height and impacted terrain beyond the threshold, as you can see there. So that's this accident scenario. Give you a few more bits of information, some serious injuries, sadly, and the aircraft quite badly damaged, subsequently declared beyond economical repair. Personnel information there as well. A pilot was a PPL, total flight time about 180 hours, so not totally inexperienced, but not massively inexperienced either. No flying in the previous 4 months. And the pilot reported feeling rusty, but he thought it would be a straightforward flight. And no refresher or instructional training had been conducted. So that's the sort of what happened to the aircraft and the pilot involved. Bit more information there. Cessna 152, like I said, it hadn't flown for a previous few months. The Met conditions are there. Quite a nice, normal, non-threatening day, you would think there as well. And the aircraft came to rest beyond the runway. The propeller indicates some low rotational energy, but no real fire. So AIB investigated, and this is what they found: a stuck exhaust valve, and consistent with it's consistent with aircraft engines that remained inactive for extended periods, allowing oil to drain from the valve guides, and it creates some corrosion and residue in there as well. So basically, what we're talking about is incomplete combustion and a partial power loss. So this is the scenario, all caused by the root cause being that inactivity. So here we go, the analysis, and this is what the AIB report, and like I say, we'll give you a copy to the mock report after this to have you can peruse over. So, technical, operational, and human factors all part of this. The engine continued to run, but you've got significantly reduced performance affecting acceleration and the climbability. And the pilot did not abort the takeoff despite some of the cues that he may have been given to him about something not going well. So sluggish acceleration, engine wasn't quite sounding normal, and the reduced climb performance or reduced takeoff performance. And like I say, the findings, there's the conclusions that you can see there on the screen. So partial power loss, inactive pilot, 4 months, didn't reject takeoff, stall. And they think the cause was the failure to reject the takeoff following a partial engine power loss. And contributory factors there: extended period of pilot inactivity, reduced preparedness for engine failure during takeoff, and some, obviously, the technical factor there as well. So as is typical with many accidents, we've got a bunch of things that all conspired together to give this pilot some particular issues on the day. Here's the recommendations from the AIB report. And like I say, they state there the importance of being prepared for an engine failure at any stage of flight. Pilots are encouraged to undertake a refresher flight with an instructor after a period of inactivity, not only to regain handling skills, but to practice emergency procedures. Yeah. So you see there's a few things that are coming out there as well. Being prepared for an engine failure at any stage of flight. And then perhaps something there, hinting about consideration of getting some refresher training if necessary. So some safety lessons to summarize that. Partial power loss, and we're going to can explore this more as we go through. Takeoff performance must be assessed early. And there you go, currency is a complete key component of safety, not merely legality. So these were the lessons that came from the report. So that's a brief canter through the report, the mock report that we've got. And you can see how here we're trying to bring in sort of a number of factors that we're going to unwrap in some of the following sections. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Charlotte. Over to you, Charlotte.
Okay, so before we get into the detail on this one, we'll start, as we often do, with a quick poll. There's no right or wrong answers here. It's just to get a feel for what people are doing. So give you a few moments, have a read and pick an answer on that. Okay. So let's have a look, see what answers we've got there. Okay, so a mixture of things there. So a lot of engine failures in the local area. Some people don't practice without an instructor. Yeah, it's a little bit tricky to surprise yourself with a failure if you haven't got an instructor with you. But anyone else got any thoughts on this?
Let us
Matt or
know in the
David?
chat.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? So I think in the training world, one of the things that we've discussed lots is the total engine failure situation where instructors and examiners, we close the throttle and simulate that total total engine failure. And of course, this is something that the partial power loss training is supposed to be very much bringing in, isn't it?
Yeah, so I'll probably see a bit more of that in the future. Okay, moving on then. Looking at preparations, there's a few bits on the screen there, things to think about, factors with pre-flight and inactivity, and some pilot recency and human factors things that may be relevant to the incident. Key issue here for our pilot is that both the pilot and the aircraft hadn't flown for 4 months. So preparation is important for every flight, especially after a long break. There's various resources out there, including on our website, that can help you structure this. Thinking about your preparation may be especially useful after a break from flying. In the Skyway Code, there's lots of useful stuff there. On page 7, they've got a checklist for the pilot, aircraft, and your pre-flight planning, which can be adapted to suit your own circumstances and help ensure that you're ready to fly. You also want to have a good think about threat and error management, and there's another checklist that can help. Got that on the slide, Matt. So we've got the PAVE checklist, which some of you may have come across. That's in the Skyway Code as well, page 123, I think. It's looking at 4 key areas to think about. The pilot, the aircraft, environment, and then external factors. So pilot, we're thinking about recent experience, fitness to fly, and the I am safe checklist, things like that. For the pilot in our example, having not flown for some time, that's going to be a key consideration. Then you've got the aircraft, looking at airworthiness, limitations for the conditions. And in our example, the aircraft also had not flown for some time, so we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Environment-wise, weather, aerodrome limitations, terrain, things to think about. Given the long break for our pilot, aim was really to keep things simple, so going for a local flight in nice weather. And similarly with the external pressures, it's to think about time pressure, delays, passengers and things like that. So for our pilot, it's going to be important to have plenty of time to prepare, minimise external pressures. So really looking at that checklist, it's the first 2 here that are key for our example. So looking firstly at the pilot. So how rusty are you? Self-assessment is a really useful skill to help develop in aviation, and it's important to try and be realistic about your own level of rustiness. It's one thing being legal to fly or carry passengers, but being proficient enough for the flight to be safe and enjoyable is another one. With more experience, rust can take a little bit longer to set in, so a lot of clubs will vary their currency requirements for this reason, but you need to try and avoid complacency. So useful things to think about. is how long has it been since your last flight? How often did you fly leading up to that? And when did you last practice key skills or emergency procedures? If you're out of practice, your recognition of threats, decision making, and your reactions are likely to be a little bit slower, so you might not be able to maintain the level of situational awareness that you would if more current. So having thought a little bit about these things, you might decide it would be a good idea to fly with an instructor. In our example here, pilot had not flown for over 4 months, so not be legal to take a non-pilot passenger. But however experienced you are, the 90-day rule might be a useful reference to consider whether you want to fly with an instructor. Might be a good idea. Especially if you're inexperienced, holding yourself to stricter currency requirements than those required by law or club rules might be wise. It's a good idea to try and make a personal rule for yourself and stick to it. That can make the decision easier rather than just trying to assess how you feel and leading up to a flight. And as with so many things in aviation, if there's any doubt, there's no doubt. If you have any doubts about your readiness to fly, if you're not sure, might be a good idea to fly with an instructor. Much better to find out that you're sharper than you thought you were with someone with you, than get up there and wish you'd had some preparation beforehand. Okay, so preparing for it. So leading up to the day of the flight, you really want to think about flying. If you're out of practice, you're likely to be slower to recognise and react to things. So thinking about the various possibilities beforehand will help mitigate some risks. You want to review checklists to refamiliarise yourself with the key speeds and procedures for your aircraft, just to get your head back in things. And as you've seen in our picture there, do some arch air flying. Talk yourself through the key phases of flight, such as in the circuit, and any emergencies and checks that you need to perform from memory. It really does help. And these things will also help you to assess how rusty you're feeling and whether you should fly with an instructor again. Planning for success, we've got some do's and don'ts on the screen here. So when you're planning, think about the fact that you're going to need more conscious attention to carry out routine tasks, things that might be more automatic if you're very current. You're going to have to think a little bit more about perhaps, so that's going to reduce your capacity for dealing with other things. Keep it simple to manage the workload. So go for a good flight in nice weather with no passengers. We've got some guides on the screen, so you might well have your own, but give it a think ahead of time and implement some. On the day, you really want to allow some more time, more than usual, so you can work slowly and methodically with no pressure. Brief yourself thoroughly, particularly for potential emergency scenarios, such as the issue experienced by our pilot in the example. And again, it really helps to have some rules and stick to them. So, for example, considering rejected takeoffs, choose a point at which you will reject the takeoff if you haven't reached a certain target speed. If the decision is already made before you go, then your response is going to be quicker and more positive than if you've got to think about it. A little bit more on that later.
Thanks very much, Charlotte. I know a few people have said, when you're flying a complex aircraft where you've got a new iPad and that, and you have what is it doing now? And that's what you're saying to itself. Well, that's what I was saying about Zoom there. So I think it flipped into some horrible presenter mode. So apologies if your screen went. It should all be sorted now. So it kind of gave a presenter view, so it got a screen and that. So I do apologise for that as well. So it should all be sorted on your screens now. Certainly, we've had confirmed that it is. I'm just going to go back. There's quite a few people have asked about this PAVE slide here as well. It is from the Skyway Code. Charlotte, is it something that you use in a PAVE slide? I got to say it's not one that I use, but I recognise some aspects of it.
Yeah, there's different examples, so it's just a case of picking one. Yeah, there's other versions out there, but it's just giving you a structure to start thinking about some of those factors and how you can make some better preparation for things.
Brilliant.
But yeah, it seems to work quite well.
And David, have you come across PAVE one at all, or?
Oh yes. As Charlotte says, it's one of several acronyms that are very easy to just quickly run through and just check that everything's in order before you head out to the skies.
Yeah, one of the ones I've come across very much is WANT. So it's weather, aircraft, navigation issues or matters, and then any threats as well. So bringing in the threats. So it's a very similar one here as well. So yeah. So that's the PAVE slide as well. Like I said, the links to all of these Skyway Code will be in your post one as well. Somebody said to use pilot plane plan. Yeah, that's a good one there as well. So anything that works for you on there as well. I'm going to pick up again here now, just to talk, give you a few thoughts about actually the aircraft and the preparation on the aircraft side of things. Time for another poll, just to get your thoughts from the floor. So what do you think out there in the audience? There's no right or wrong answer to this. And I say, just to emphasize, we don't record who says what or anything like that. That's not, but what do you think is the most likely technical threat after an aircraft has been on the ground for a long period? So there's a couple of choices there. Fuel system contamination, flat spotted tires, insect animal ingress, oil contamination. We've just picked a few things there. What do you think is the most likely technical threat? Have a pick of those as well. So no right or wrong answer. And if we could have a look at the results from there, please. What have people gone for? 81% fuel system contamination. Yeah. Well, actually, we had a discussion about this in the pre-workup for this webinar, and we agree as well. Why do we think this tops the list? Well, I say we did a little bit of digging into this, and some of the things are, water condensation in particular can accumulate in partially filled fuel tanks, and you can get growth, especially with avgas stored for long periods, looking at clogging of filters and lines. And, sediment and varnish can even form there as well with fuel aging as well. So all of these are threats that can lead to rough running, that power loss, engine failure, quite possibly a partial power loss as well with some of the scenarios we've been talking about. So let's go back to our case study and consider then the aircraft really needs a return to flying package 2 as well. So the aircraft in our case study, it was legally airworthy, but we could say it was not operationally ready. And this event highlights returning an aircraft to service after some inactivity. We need to give it the same kind of preparation as returning a pilot to flying. And this is even after you could have your thoughts. What do you consider a significant or insignificant period of non-activity? Somebody's also said in the chat there, it depends where the aircraft is stored. A few people have said that as well. I would definitely agree if whether it's an outdoor or an indoor storage and dependent on the condition of that storage. Lots of different factors involved there as well. But let's say the condition of the aircraft after storage or inactivity, we really need to have a think about that. Like I say, extended inactivity increases vulnerability, and like I say, this partial power loss situation we're seeing, that's a particular threat. Takeoff decision making as well. So, we really want to pay attention on that first takeoff after a period of inactivity. Is the acceleration more sluggish than normal? Is the engine got any abnormal sounds or failure to achieve expected speed by a defined power point? And David might mention that later on as well. So, make decisions early, really pay attention to what the aircraft is telling you. And we've already talked about, and we can discuss this more in Q&A and the chat as well, but we practice total engine failures a lot, but it's those partial power loss that may be a real threat after the after some time of the aircraft not flying there as well. So what can you do? Preparation and planning are the two factors we'd like to just give you some thoughts and suggestions. Preparation. So as well as your own preparation, you can go through a significant a period of preparation for the aircraft as well. So things that we can check, the insurance, radio certificate, all that good stuff, any charts, any navigation databases, and then, really go over the engine, the avionics, and the fuel system as we've discussed there as well. It's better for aircraft and our engines to fly regularly, but we know this isn't always possible for a number of reasons. Engine ground runs, can be a factor, but they can also be as damaging. So some people actually inhibit their aircraft there as well. And if you've got any doubts about how the aircraft engine has been looked after during a period of time off, seek engineering advice there as well. The LAA have got a technical leaflet, but we just put a link to there as well with some really good advice and some really good pointers on this. Charlotte, I think it's fair to say quite a few aircraft in the LAA fleet, they often have flying seasons, don't they? Especially people on farm strips, especially this year as well. So they can have, periods of activity in the summer and almost a fallow season over the winter period, and certainly that's something I think we see in the LAA and maybe some of the BMAA fleets a lot as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good opportunity to get some maintenance done as well over the winter if you've got a waterlogged strip and things like that. So yeah, tend to get some quiet periods over the winter for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Avgas, any time over 6 months, you should really be treating avgas with caution. And if in doubt, maybe you need to even drain and replace the fuel. And fuels do degrade over time, significantly MOGAS as well. Somebody also mentioned it as well in the chat as well. Windows and flying surfaces, make sure they're really clean and scrubbed as well. I went to fly an aircraft not long ago actually, and the windows looked fairly clean, but actually when we got in and were about to start, there was quite a fine film of kind of oily dust on the surfaces, and it was quite unpleasant actually. So we had to all unstrap, get out, and find some stuff and go and clean that as well. And like I say, we already mentioned taking at wildlife residents as well. That is certainly on farm strips or whatever, that could be a pret as well. And planning there as well. We're going to cover this in some more detail next as well. But it's all about thinking about, approaching the flight in a manner that, do you know what engine parameters and other operating parameters and limitations in your aircraft you're expecting to see? If you're going to do your mag checks, for example, what are the limits? What is the minimum you're looking for? What is the maximum? What's the difference between the two magnetos? What static RPM should you be seeing in the aircraft? Alternator charging or suction, what are the limits that you're expecting to see? Are you seeing the limits as you would normally see? And if you see things that are slightly on the limits of tolerance, do you really want to accept them? If the engine is not quite getting the static RPM, does it need looking at? Or if it's not idling properly at the right limits, it's kind of stopping. These flights, early flights back are the time to go and do it. And yeah, somebody's commented in the chat as well, a max static RPM. Yeah, so often some aircraft, some of the diamonds and that, there's quite specific about limits about achieving an RPM or a loading or whatever. But even aircraft like PA-28s and that, there's a static RPM lower limit that you should be achieving, and you will see that at the start of the takeoff roll. And we can talk about in the Q&A about the rejection of a takeoff. That should always be part of our planning considerations. We should be ready for that as well. Right, we've called this next section Pride Before a Fall. So a little bit of colloquial, but I'm going to introduce David. And like I say, David, over to you. Great to have you with us and contributing to this tonight.
Thanks, Matt. So as people watching will be familiar, we like to have some audience participation. So could we have a poll? The previous one was asking what you practice without an instructor. So this one's slightly different. It's assuming you have your biannual refresher flight or your proficiency check. What do you find is the most beneficial exercise during that flight? It might be slightly different to what was said in the previous poll. So as Matt continues to point out, there's no record of what you enter here, but this is just your preference. So when we're ready, can we see the results? It does sound like PFLs are the most popular. Yeah, I think we probably expected that. I do wonder whether, I know we normally do takeoffs and landings just normally in every flight, of course, you have to do one of each, but whether practicing a different type of takeoff, for example, a short field takeoff or a glide approach landing, might be a little bit more interesting. But PFL certainly is quite an important skill and needs to be current just in case you need to use it. Okay, can we go on to the next slide, please? So we're just going to revisit this case study. And what we do know is that the pilot was a licensed PPL, had 180 hours, but we don't really know whether he passed his test 3 years ago and he's flown loads per year, or he passed his test 35 years ago and he's only done 5 hours per year for the last few years. So the recency could vary quite a lot. But what we do know is that there's no flying in the previous 4 months, and that is just inevitably going to reduce the performance, the automatic emergency response that you might have to an urgent situation, and being able to make that decision quickly. So the pilot reported feeling rusty, but he thought the flight would be straightforward, and so he chose not to have an instructional flight beforehand. The accident did involve a qualified legal pilot. He doesn't have to have any training. After a few months, you just can't take a passenger. But what's being degraded is that judgment, that decision tempo, how quickly he made the decision to abort the takeoff or not, and recognize the threat. So when you do fly with an instructor, it just helps restore that discipline. Do that pre-departure pilot brief, and just reminds you of all those little things that, if they're not regularly practiced, can just be quickly forgotten. So we just go on to the next slide. We talked earlier about, when was the last time you practiced these things? Did you practice them on your last biennial flight 2 years ago, or did you do them more recently? And it sounds like a few people practice the practice forced landings. But have you thought about this partial power reduction in the cruise? When did you last choose to make a glide approach to land, just for a bit of a challenge? Now, it may be that you're a pilot who rarely flies solo, and so it isn't appropriate to practice these maneuvers with non-pilots on board. But it is worth considering when you're flying solo or with another qualified pilot. Refresher training after inactivity can focus more on these abnormal and emergency scenarios rather than just the normal handling. And that helps build some post-layoff confidence, regains those motor skills, and just enables the better decision-making to be practiced. So move on to the next slide. I think you might have picked up, if not on this webinar, from other sources, that partial power loss is something we're quite keen to incorporate into the training. It's now part of the official PPL syllabus, and instructors are encouraged to include that in refresher training. So we can do that with quite subtle power reductions. And you may think that the aircraft is still flying. It's just not quite 100%. But you don't know after some power loss whether you're going to get complete power failure at any time, or are you just going to hope that it will continue to provide enough lift just to squeak back to the nearest airport? So in this case, on takeoff, if the pilot had maybe had some partial power training, they might have been more prepared to make an abort decision quickly and at the appropriate point. I think it's in the FAA system, they have a 50-70 rule. There may be other numbers you might use, but 50% of the runway, you should have 70% of your takeoff speed And that takeoff speed, decision speed will vary depending on the performance of the aircraft and other factors, but it gives you a general guide of what you're looking for. And that would allow you to have enough runway left to abort the takeoff. So don't be afraid to ask an instructor to cover this topic next time you fly with one, even if it's just discussing it on the ground, because it might come in handy one day.
And David, just to add, yeah, we obviously did our whole webinar on partial power loss as well. Lots of information in that webinar as well. We'll put a link to that in the post chat, the post webinar email that comes out as well, if you want to go into that subject in depth. But certainly partial power loss is something that the CAA and ourselves are very much recommending you look to discuss and actually practice airborne during the your refresher hour with an instructor coming up, certainly if it's something that you haven't done before there as well. And there's an interesting bit just popped in the chat as well, which I'm going to move on to this one because I like David to address that bit in the chat afterwards when he's mentioned this one as well. So over to you to do this. I don't want to eat your sandwiches before we do the slide, David, but do that, and then it'd be interesting somebody just put something in the chat to comment on there as well. So yeah, over to you for this one again. Thanks.
So this comment, I got shouted at by an instructor for aborting a landing I wasn't comfortable with. Yeah, I mean, my view is every approach is an abort or a go around until you positively decide to complete the landing, and you can do that at any point. And I would always encourage people to choose to go around rather than continuing and hoping everything will turn out well. So I'm a little surprised by that. Yes, I think somebody's pointing out, so Hugh, 2/3 of your takeoff speed in 1/3 of the takeoff distance available. Yeah, there are different numbers. I'm not saying there's a specific one that we're stating. It will depend on the aircraft performance and the runway environment that you're operating in. But the main thing is that you've thought about it and you have a decision point. Okay, so just a quick thought about some organizational cultural factors. If you're in a club, you may well have some standard club rules that say after 30 or 45 or 60 days, depending on your number of hours experience, you may be mandated to have a check flight. But of course, if you're an aircraft owner or a share owner, the onus is entirely on you, and it's up to you to decide as and when you need a refresher flight. And of course, you can do that more than just once every 2 years, as you're mandated to do. So the question is whether some people might see that as just an unnecessary enforced overhead, or whether they see there's a bit of stigma. Does that mean I'm not a good pilot if I have to get an instructor to fly with me? Or indeed, do you look forward to learning something from having an hour with an instructor? So we just move on to the next slide. There. So can we have the next? Yeah. So I think what we're aiming for is that the general principle of having an instructional flight is something that is part of your normal airmanship. It's something where instruction is preventative. It's not punitive. We are not out to stop you flying. We're out to improve your airmanship, good practice, and encourage safe flying. So just as an example, today I was at a grass airfield and I was talking to a pilot who's just about to go for his biannual refresher flight. And after a delay because of the terrible weather, a medical issue, scheduling and instruct, all these factors, and he's got to get it done by the end of the month. He was saying he was really looking forward to the refresher flight. And in particular, he wanted to be stretched. He wanted to learn something from it rather than just have having to do it as an enforced requirement in order to keep his license valid. So I thought that was really positive, and he was coming along to the instructor with some specific topics that he wanted to focus on during that hour. And as an instructor, I know I much prefer students to come when they're coming for that hour to have some good ideas, something that they want to practice, that they know they need to do. It's good to see that Sean enjoys his refresher flights. I think a number of people do, but make the most of it. Go and figure out what you want rather than just turning up and doing what an instructor thinks you might need.
And I'd just like to pick up actually, there's a point there which I think is really interesting. I scribbled it down on my piece of paper here, about the language that we use around it, replacing check flight with refresher flight. I know a number of clubs I operate in call them club checks. Well, there's an element of jeopardy about that language, isn't there? There's an element of test around that language. So a club training flight or a club famil flight might actually be better language. And I think that's quite a really interesting point for those of us in and around training organisations or groups and things. So I thought that was a really good point. Charlotte, I don't know at yours, what do you call it at your school? Go on then. You can tell us you've got a really good, clever name for it.
Currency check and currency flight. It doesn't really have a strict name, but yeah, it's focusing on the currency, and I like to think that people find them useful and enjoyable as well as just required by the
currency
rules.
flight. Yeah, I like that. It's a good non-threatening term as well. So yes, so familiarization, currency flight, refresher, skills refresher. It's a great debate. Improvement, but yeah, I really like those things, and I think perhaps that's something to think about. We call them group checks or club checks or things. Does introduce an aura of testing around it. So I thought that was a really fascinating point. Thank you for contributing that, people. Yeah. Yeah, dual check. Yeah.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, we just want you to be a safe pilot. That's both for the sake of you, the pilot, and also your passengers. So yeah, back over to Matt for the Q&A.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions that I'm going to pick up on as well. So a few people have asked questions about the availability of engineers and mechanics, and people making the point that having ready availability to engineering advice or on tap is something that gives comfort and all the rest of it. And I think that's fairly true, David. I know I don't know what your experience is, but certainly the clubs I've operated where there's on-site maintenance, I think it's fair to say we've been quicker to seek the input and guidance of engineers than maybe if it's an off-site maintenance company, and there's always been that pressure that we've got to get somebody to drive in or fly the aircraft somewhere. I don't know what your experiences of that are.
Yeah. One club that I've been involved in is very lucky because we're hangared in the maintenance hangar, with the maintenance organisation, and one of the guys there is actually an instructor as well. So it's almost a seamless operation. It's something I've come across more often in the US than in the UK, but certainly if you have somewhere on site, that's very helpful indeed. Even if you're just asking as a pilot, I'm not an engineer, being able to ask the dumb question and just check that something's not awry is really helpful.
Yeah, and Charlotte, I think you've got maintenance on site in your school.
Yeah, we've got maintenance on site, so it does make it easy if you can just pick up the phone and know who you're talking to, or pop round and ask someone. Also with permit airplanes, it's you can just pick up the phone and chat to your inspector if you've got any queries. So it's always nice to get things cleared up rather than just hope it's going to be okay.
Yeah, and some people are commenting on about the difficulty of the skills challenges of growing engineers in the UK at the minute, and that is very much an issue. And I think some forward-thinking organisations are starting to invest in apprentice schemes and bringing in younger generations to engineering. But I know it is significant problem. I think the LAA as well is having quite a turnover of inspectors as well, Charlotte, aren't they? Whereas some people are retiring and stepping down, and it's encouraging the next generation to grow those skills to be inspectors as well as engineers, I think. So
Yeah, it's keeping numbers steady with new ones coming along. But yeah, it's a good opportunity for everybody actually to do a bit of training and learn a little bit more about the technical side of their aircraft is always valuable knowledge.
yeah, a few people as well commented in the chat about based at a strip, they're not permitted to fly circuits because of noise abatement or local restrictions. That's an interesting factor and a point as well. So what I think one person, Paul, who I know well, I've flown with Paul from his strip, commented that they take the effort to go and fly to another airfield and do some circuits for practice as well. I know some airfields actually offer a special package rate where you can just go and bash the circuit. So, for example, Enstone near us, I think it's £25 all day per day for as many circuits as you want. So sometimes it's worth flying, bashing the circuit, stopping for a coffee, and doing that. Whereas, actually, it might be worth flying somewhere if your home base is expensive or has plenty of restrictions. Another question about practicing loss of a control surface now, or loss of control surface ability. So what we're talking about here is maybe practicing for loss of elevator control or loss of rudder control, or one of the things we do in the military pretty regularly actually is a stuck throttle as well. Now, David, I don't know whether that's something you train for or look at in your school at all.
I would say I don't tend to do that
Yeah,
regularly. No.
interesting one. Charlotte, is that
Um,
something you in part of your syllabuses or something like that?
Loss control surface is an interesting one. Stuck throttle, yes, we can do that. We've got a simulator, which is great because then we can throw all sorts of different failures at people. But it's a good one to get people thinking about decision making. 'Cause it depends what you've got and where you are. There's a lot of options, so it's good to just get you thinking about these things.
Yeah, I've had
yeah.
two people I know personally have had a loss of rudder control, one with a stuck rudder and one with a kind of partial control disconnection with rudder actually as well. So quite interesting. And my friend that had it, his decision making was very good. And rather than coming back to home base where there was quite a crosswind, he decided to go to another airfield with a long runway that was more into wind and go and land. So there was some real good decision making from them. But it's again another scenario put on your biannual refresher might be something
Mm.
that you want to think about practicing a stuck throttle or a loss of a control surface. And somebody said, yes, stuck throttle's not unheard of in winter and things like that. Yeah, it could be another factor, isn't it? But there. So yeah. Somebody said, what's the best advice for stuck throttle? Right. So the way the military teach it and in elementary training as well is there's kind of two ways that you can deal with it. You can either come into the overhead at height and then fly sort of like a practice force landing pattern down to the airfield. So you come, if you stuck at full power, you come into the overhead and then look to using mixture control reduce and effectively fly a forced landing onto the airfield. The other way of doing it is you descend to low level and run in almost level. And then when you're approaching the runway, you pitch up into a position looking down the runway where you can definitely land from it. And then you close the mixture to close, cut the engine and then glide that last bit in from a final approach. So that's one of the ways that it's practicing, but it's definitely something worth thinking about. And again, I've had another friend that did have a struck throttle stuck full, not unheard of in some of the Rotax type installations with springs there as well, or other aircraft makes as well that have certain configurations. Interesting question that I'd like to pick up as a final one. Somebody's asked, is it safe to fly solo after a short layoff or fly with another qualified syndicate member? Now, this is an interesting one that generates all sorts of debate. So I think the scenario here is we've got a group aircraft, two qualified pilots. Is it safe to fly solo or take another qualified pilot with them? What are your thoughts there, David?
I would have thought taking a second pilot, provided they're qualified to fly the plane, would be the better option. Just because there's two pairs of eyes looking out, and two sets of minds thinking about what's going on.
So that's definitely the positive, and there is some differences. Obviously, under Part FCL licenses, you have to have three takeoffs and landings in the class within 90 days to take a
Mm.
passenger. The status of that other pilot would be passenger. If you're flying on an A&O, an old UK PPL or an MPPL, you're permitted to take another qualified pilot with you for the purposes of regaining passenger currency. So there is a difference between the two licensing regimes at the minute. Charlotte, that's the positive side of things. Any thoughts on the potential pitfalls or negatives of taking another pilot that you've seen or experienced?
Want to think about who's in command, so be really clear
Yeah,
who's
yeah,
flying and who's not.
definitely.
Yeah,
And if you're going to share any duties, so maybe someone will do the radio so that you can concentrate on flying or whatever. But plan it, discuss it beforehand, and be really clear. You don't want any confusion, especially if something goes wrong. Who's going to fly it?
yeah, absolutely. And somebody said, "Are SSDR pilots required to have revalidation flights with instructor?" I don't believe so because they're out. SSDR pilots revalidation flights. It depends on the class rating and I don't know exactly the answer to that one. So I don't know if Charlotte or David do. We was probably one. I have an answer in my head, but I'm not totally clear on my line. So I would want to go and check that one up. I don't know whether David, that's one that
Uh,
springs to.
I don't know the answer off the top of my head, so I'd better not say.
So there used to be a regime, certainly in the microlight world, where people had their revalidation by experience signed up, restricted to single seat only. That was
Mhm.
one of the old MPPL restrictions, but exactly the current wording, I'm not sure. Somebody's pointed out SSDR is the aircraft, not the license. So whether there's any alleviations, I'm not 100% sure. Oh, and another final question I will pick up before we just wrap up with Charlotte's summary is somebody's mentioned about using Microsoft Flight Sim. So what about simulators in general? I mean, you mentioned that earlier, Charlotte. I think there's some real benefit from using simulators in an appropriate way, and I guess you do in your school a bit.
Yes, we've got a simulator. It's not approved, so you can't log time on it. But if people are feeling rusty, it's a really good way of getting over some of that rust, and you can strip away some of the additional pressures such as traffic and radio and things, and just focus on the flying and getting comfortable again. So it's a really good first step back. So you're feeling a little bit more comfortable and up to speed when you get back into the airplane. So
And
very useful
I,
tool.
I know
Yeah,
one club of mine has got one because David built it and installed it. So Dave,
still going strong.
you
Still
did,
going
yeah.
strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm a great fan of simulators if they're used appropriately. Yeah, we have them at two or three of the clubs that I've operated at. We've got the very nice latest Cirrus simulator down at Biggin Hills if the weather's not good, or people want to practice, you know, certain abnormal scenarios, or just get familiar with the avionics. Then it's ideal for that. Um, and as you may know, I even do some remote instruction uh, where people have their own simulator, and you can remotely coach them, especially if it's just going through the procedures of what do you do in certain situations, just making sure you've got the flows correctly and so on.
Brilliant. Great stuff and some real people. In fact, we're just getting some answers coming in. Somebody's used the Chat GPT answer, which Chat GPT has some benefits. But somebody microlight class ratings without the dual refresher flight, as I thought, can if the class rating's
uh,
restricted to single seat only, but all of a flight experience. So that's a microlight class rating alleviation, it would appear. So yeah, thank you for those that contributed on that. And yes, Sarah in the chat, yes, I was your examiner. I hope you're doing well and continuing to enjoy your flying. So there we go. So let's have a look at a bit of a summary of these. Charlotte, any key things you'd like to point out. So what I'd add here is we've put together a little checklist of things that we think if you're going back flying, you might want to consider. And Charlotte's just going to point out some of the things. This will again be available in the post webinar email that comes to you.
Okay, yeah, so I'm not going to read all of this, so you can read it in the after information, but it's just, as we said earlier, really helpful to have a checklist, make sure you've covered everything, help you get back to your flying nice and quickly and safely. So there's a few here, we've got one on each section that we've been looking at. So the first one, looking at your kit and your situational awareness. So charts, avionics, software updates, all of that kind of thing. Make sure everything for the aircraft is ready and you've got all the things that you need, and that time buffer that we talked about earlier. Don't put time pressure on yourself. Give yourself plenty of time. On the aircraft, thinking about all the different systems, having a good look at everything. So fuel system, seals, wildlife check. Has any critters got into anything they shouldn't have done? Look at the tyres and batteries, logbooks, aircraft paperwork. So just check everything's up to date and all the boxes are ticked. And then lastly, the pilot mindset and the skills. So that's coming back to all those checklists that we talked about at the beginning. So yeah, I'm safe check. Yeah, a couple of people picked up on that in the chat. So yes, illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and emotion. So just again, just guiding yourself through those processes so you've covered everything. And your skill recency, and then that local only rule. So as we said, keep it simple. Don't put too much pressure on yourself until you're back up to speed. So a few personal takeaways, some things to think about. What might you do differently after your next break from flying? It's worth thinking about breaks that you've had in the past, how long you were off and how it felt getting back. So you've got some sort of guidance from your own experience of what you might want to think about. Personal triggers for rejected takeoffs. Think about keeping those emergency procedures nice and instinctive. Preparation, as we've said, and lots of resources on the website, some of these checklists and other things that can help guide your thinking and help you have a structured approach to getting back into flying.
Thanks, Charlotte. That's great. Like I say, we'll summarize some of this in the post email as well. And one other thing I would like to add as well is this is all about preparation and things like that. But let's think about you've done your kind of first few flights back and they've all gone pretty well. One of the things is the self debrief. We mentioned this in some of our human factors things as well. So don't have to do it. You can do that after flight, having a cup of tea or back in the hangar or driving home or even that evening over a beer or coffee in your local pub or whatever. And just think back and going, right, what went well about my first few flights back this season? What didn't go so well? What was I uncertain of, and what did I need to go and do that? I flew particular type of twin this week on Tuesday, and after the flight, I was driving home, and I thought, you know what? When I was telling my student about the go around button, I was telling him about how it does this and does that and puts the flight director and that, but I wasn't 100% sure exactly what pitch attitude it would display on the flight director. I knew it gave a pitch up and the autopilot came out and all good things like that as well. But I thought, I need to remember what that thing. So when I got home, I was having a coffee that night, and I dug up on my laptop the flight manual and just went and read it. And it's a bit of a self debrief and a bit of self teaching, self refresher. So take a note of it or just think about those things that you think I was a bit unsure on that, or I couldn't quite remember what was the speed for this or what power setting I should have been looking for that. So yeah, do that self debrief and that self reflection. It's a really valuable and free way of bringing your skills up. I recommend. So thanks as ever for coming. Those are some of the links that you can connect to us as well. CA Skywise there as well. Hopefully most of you know about the CA Skywise. It's the free email service from the CA where you can get updates and information on changing regulations, changing forms and that. Sign up on Skywise if you're not already signed up on the CA. Just Google CAA Skywise and you'll get the links there to just sign up, and you can click boxes to see what types of different information you do or don't want to get thing. And that's a really good way of keeping up to date and keeping your background knowledge up to date from the CA. And they give you links to all sorts of good information and safety sense leaflets that are coming out there as well. So thanks for joining us there as well. We're targeting these webinars at an hour long because some of the feedback we've had is people say an hour is about just right for the amount of information they want to get and the interaction that you want to have with us. Some of the more detailed technical ones we've done a bit longer. Some of the ones we've done a bit shorter, but people saying about an hour is about right. So please, in the survey that comes up, let us know about that. And let us know things or themes that you're interested in finding out more about. A lot of these workshops that we do in Taylor, it's because that's the information that you have said you really like to get from us. We've got ones coming up. We've got some more weather ones coming up. And we did an AME one. We've got some more RT ones coming up as well. So yeah, please let us know subjects that you're interested in, and we can get the relevant experts and people in to get information about that. But other than that, David, Charlotte, thanks for joining us and contributing. It's been brilliant to have you with me, helping present. Thanks for bearing with us as well, especially when we had a few Zoom injects earlier on, but hopefully we got to the end with that. So look forward to seeing you for the next one in March. We've got Phil Bird and some others back from that. Nigel, who sometimes with us, he's away on holiday at the minute as well. So we'll have some of the other familiar faces back with us, helping the team that we've got here present tonight as well. But thanks very much. Take care. And if you see us around the airfield, do come and say hello. Do come and have a chat. And we look forward to chatting in person as well. Thanks very much. Take care, everybody.